Let's see if this is gonna work. Oh, okay, it's recording. Awesome. So yeah, basically today I just wanted to go over a few of the things that are like nice to know with FeatureScript from people who are coming from like more of an on-shape like context. And I just wanted to go over like some of the things that you might be seeing within like the stuff that FeatureScript is writing so that you can like better prepare and like better account for that for any of the CAD that you guys are making. So let me share my screen and let's see, is this right? Let's get started. Okay, cool. So they're basically like within Onshape and when you guys are CADing, there are two big building blocks that you can work with. And so like the first of which, let me make a really quick sketch right here. So the first of which is features. And so one example of a feature is, for example, the extrude. So I can just add like an extrude right here into my Part Studio. And you guys have probably seen this like a million times. And then we also have things like fillet and chamfer, and then we have like linear patterning. And these are all sorts of like things that you can do within a Part Studio. And so there's another big, I guess, what do you call it? Like building block that's within Part Studios, and that's with like configurations. And so you guys have probably also worked a ton with configurations. So this is just like a review. If you want to add like a configuration variable, you would say like height, and then you can then call it from within your features, like so. And so as you guys have probably played around with, by changing that variable, you can then go ahead and change like the different values that are being passed into these features. So with configuration variables, there is, this is like the main way that you guys have been doing it within the FeatureScript and the Onshape user interface. But there is another way that's less commonly used, and that's with the variable feature. So the variable feature, it functions for all intents and purposes the same way as a configuration variable that you would put up here, but rather the variable is just going to be, let's see if we do length, and then we set that to 1 centimeter. So this variable is going to appear within the feature list that you have on this left side. So it acts like a feature in that it sort of like participates in this sort of ordering. So for example, let's say I put it here, and then I go actually here. If I go into my sketch, let's say that I want to make this equal to the length. So you can see that this length is being now pulled, I believe, from the from that feature. And hopefully, if I can change this, something like 2 cm. Did that work? Nope. Let's see. I don't know why this is not changing length. Okay, there we go. So yeah, now if I were to go ahead and change this configuration variable, it would affect the drawing sort of the same way in which it would happen if you were changing this configuration. But with the added caveat, because we're working inside of this feature list, then if I were to put this after the sketch, you can see that the sketch fails because it doesn't have the length variable anymore. So I would have to put that towards the top. And so that's just a little review of like what sorts of things we're working with inside of just like a Part Studio context. And these two building blocks, both like features, configuration variables, and also variable features, like these building blocks are all going to be ways in which feature script is going to be able to interact with Part Studios. So I'm going to stop right there. Are there any questions so far? Okay, cool. And also like feel free to like unmute yourself whenever you'd like and just like interrupt me if something is not making sense. Okay, cool. So now those are like the building blocks within Onshape. And so for now, we're going to be looking at some more of the building blocks within FeatureScript. So we're going to go into this Feature Studio right here. And so the only way to be able to get stuff from FeatureScript into Onshape is by using a feature type. And so a feature type is just generally any one of these like features that you can add into your Part Studio. A feature type is just like the general like statement of it, but a feature is an instance of a feature type. So for example, we have an extrude right here, and this describes the feature type. But if I were to add multiple extrudes into like this feature list, those would just be features. It's a little bit of a weird like terminology, but if you're familiar with a little bit of like Python or Java, you can think of the feature types as classes, where it's like general, and then you can think of features themselves as the objects, which are just like instances of the class. So now let's go into the Feature Studio, and let's say that we want to create a new feature type. In order to do this, it's really easy, and you just click on New Feature. It automatically populates your entire, all of like the basics that you need for this feature. And right now it looks a little bit messy. You can see there's like actually quite a few things that are added here, but it's all pretty intuitive once you get the hang of it. So the first thing that's important here is the feature type name. And so the feature type name is currently my feature. So let's say that we commit this Feature Studio, which means to update it and allow it to be used within other Part Studios. You can then see that we have a custom feature called My Feature. And if we were to go back into here and we were to change this to something like Oliver's feature and then commit, we can see that the name has changed here. So that's just like a way of sort of like customizing the name here. Then down here, these are like a bunch of words that like are kind of confusing, and we're not going to get too much into these, but some of the more relevant points here are these three parameters here. So these three parameters are given by like the Onshape platform, and when you instantiate the feature within a Part Studio, which I'm going to do right now, it right now does nothing. But when you instantiate it, this Part Studio is passing in a context, ID, and definition. So what do those mean? A context is essentially a representation of what the Part Studio looks like. So if I go back into here, we can see that this feature that I instantiated here, the context is going to be everything that's above it and this configuration right here. So that's just like what the context does. It represents what's already happened in the Part Studio. The ID is just a random, it's like a unique identifier for the feature within the Part Studio, and we're not going to use it that much. The definition is pretty important though, and the definition is basically a way for us to take in the inputs to that feature. We saw this previously within Extrude, where we can enter in a bunch of different inputs into this feature that will then change the actual behavior of it. And by adding to this definition is map, we can then begin to like take in these inputs and sort of like mess around with them. So are there any questions so far? Feel free to stop me as usual. Okay, cool. Moving along. Okay, so in order to actually get information into these features, what we do is we add parameters. This is done within the precondition section. You can see that there's a precondition here under where the feature is defined, as well as a body where it says define the function's action. And so this precondition is going to be where we put all of our parameters. So let's say that we want to put in a length parameter. So this is like pretty self-explanatory. And we want to store this length parameter into our definition map. This is the only way that we can take in these inputs. And if we can just commit this right now, let's take a look at what's happened with our feature. You can now see that the new myLength parameter has been added into the feature. But of course, if we were to like change this to 5 centimeters, nothing's going to happen really, because we haven't really tied it to any of the functionality within this Part Studio. And so in order to do that, we can begin to define some of the feature's actions. And so we're not going to worry about this length bound. We can also, in the same way we change the feature type name, we can also change the length here. So why don't we make this feature simply like take in a length and then double it. So we'll say that this is like half length and then say that's okay. If we were to go back into the Part Studio, you'd see that the name has changed. And so now we can begin defining the feature's functionality. And so we can do that within the body of the function. In order to do that, we can call different functions, but we're going to keep it simple right here. And we're just going to take this definition, myLength, and then we're going to have it equal to twice that. So this is just doubling the value that's stored. So after we have that, we now have two options for being able to bring this into our Part Studio. And those two options take the form of two different functions, the first of which is set variable. So set variable is more used for being able to set existing configuration variables that are like made in here. And what this does is it simply like adds that variable without making it a sort of feature. And that seems a little bit confusing, but I'll get to more on that later. So that name, what we can do is we can set it to length. And then our value is then going to be definition.myLength. Okay. So now we have this value being put into the context. And this, remember, this context is just like a representation of what the Part Studio looks like at that moment. So if we were to commit this, we can then begin to use this functionality here. I'm going to put this feature towards the top so that it will affect all of the future features. And so now we can make the half length 5 centimeters. We expect it to be 10 centimeters in the outcome here. So then, let's see. Can we go into the sketch and see what's happening? Okay, so, okay, yeah, that's right. I actually should be doing this as height because, like I mentioned, we have to be editing these configuration variables that are up here in this top. So I'm pretty sure now it should work. There we go. So now you can see that the box got a lot taller. And we can see that this happened because what we took this half height, it then edits the value of this height configuration variable, and then it goes ahead and changes it. So you can see that this height has turned into 10 centimeters rather than 2 centimeters here. So that was a bit of a lot to like take in. Is everybody okay with that? Are there any questions about what I just went over? Okay. Cool. And so that is one way of putting information into like these part studios. And so the other way is to use the assign variable. So the difference between assign variable and set variable is that a set variable only edits like these configurations that already exist, but rather these assign variable functions, these what they do is they actually create an entirely new variable feature within the Part Studio. So we're going to try doing this instead, and we're going to be doing it on this length right here. And so we can see that it's common. We have a context and an ID, and these are familiar from how we define this feature, because assign variable, like this feature that we're creating, this is just calling a feature the same way. So it makes sense that it would have the same sort of inputs as whatever we're making right here. And so we don't really need to affect anything with the context, since like that's being handled for us. We can make this ID something different so that it doesn't create a problem in the future for like the names. And then we can set this name equal to whatever we set. Let's say that we want width now. And we can just make this width something arbitrary. Let's say like 15 centimeters, I believe. Okay. So now we can go into the sketch. Let's go ahead and edit this. We'll make it equal to width. And now you can see that width has been added into our list of variables. And now it became really wide. And so now you can see like we managed to go all the way from either setting existing variables or adding new ones, all the way to being able to get them to affect the overall geometry within the Part Studio. And so thinking back to Ethan's presentation, this is going to be one half of the puzzle right here. This is going to be where we instantiate the hydraulic design features within the Part Studio. So like imagine this is a flocculator. We would be having a feature that would be inside of that Part Studio, and it would then be affecting the variables that are being set within that Part Studio. And so this is just like one of the different ways that we can tie together features in Part Studios. And this is what we would call like feature within a Part Studio. And I'm going to get to Part Studio inside of a feature later, but this is just like the more simpler way of being able to add these values in. Okay. Are there any questions on that? Okay, cool. So then the other way in which we would go ahead and add features, or the other way in which we would be able to like add these sorts of variables or values from feature script into sort of like our Part Studio. The other way to do that is with, like I mentioned, having Part Studios inside of our features. And this is a little bit more complex, but we can see this right here in the example of the build feature that Ethan made. And so right here, this is like, we are actually calling superderive from within our feature script. And this is like as opposed to using superderive within just like your normal Part Studio. So for example, if I want to add superderive to this, then I can just like do whatever and like choose these parameters. But this is analogous to what we're doing here within the build function, where we have superderive called from within feature script. And so you can see here we have things like, let's see, Part Studio, location, custom configuration. If we were to make a SuperDrive here, we also have Part Studio, location, custom configuration. And so we can see furthermore how these features inside of a Part Studio can then match what's going on within our feature studios. So why don't we go ahead and try doing that right now? I'm going to have to make another Part Studio here. Okay. And I'm going to make another feature from within here. We'll call it feature 2 and feature 2. Okay. We're just going to make this pretty simple, and we're not going to have any parameters in this, but we're very simply going to be importing our SuperDerive functionality. So I believe it should be in AC. Oh, no, it should be in FS. SuperDerive. There we go. We're going to give that a name, SD. And like I'm skipping over some of the details here, especially with imports, because you guys aren't going to need to know that. But the important takeaway from like what's going on here is just how we're setting these variables. And with being able to like know where these variables are being set, you can then go ahead and debug if you ever see like a problem, and you can like quickly go ahead and like dive into the feature script and see like where exactly that's coming from. So for example, let's say that you're like messing around with the flocculator and you notice that baffle spacing is off for some reason. So you're like, I know that this comes from the hydraulic design feature, but I'm not sure why baffle spacing is not giving me the correct value. And so what you can easily do is simply go into the design feature, like the code right here, and look at where these variables are being set. And from that, you can then begin to see like, why is my baffle spacing not correct? And so that's just like an example of how you would be using this knowledge. Okay, so now we're going to also import a Part Studio, and we're going to do Part Studio 2. So let's see. We do need to use all of this. I'm just going to copy and paste all these parameters. Again, we're just kind of skipping a bunch of these details. But at least for now, just know that if you're working with a build feature, which is what I'm showing you right now, how we have Part Studios in features, if you're working with that, then this is like what you would want to be working with or debugging, this call to SuperDerive. And so circular reference. Okay. Yeah, I don't think it likes that, so I'm actually just going to create some really quick geometry within Part Studio 3 and then import that instead. Extrude. There we go. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going to switch this over to Part Studio 3. Okay. So we also want to give this name so that we can call it later on. Okay, so now when we have our SuperDerive imported and we have our Part Studio imported, we can then begin to use it. So our build function, this is just going to take the same name as what we define our Part Studio to be, and you just do like : build. It's kind of like a, don't want to worry about that too much. Our configuration is then going to be like a map of what we are using. So like this configuration will usually take the place of definition. And so again, just to reiterate, definition is going to be where we're storing all of our calculations and our parameters that are passed into the feature. So like, again, we have this definition myLength, which is what gets then passed into this set variable. And likewise, we can do that same way of adding our information into the configuration of the PartStudio. So if we look back on how like a superderive is actually called, if we have one here. So you can see that if we select some sort of PartStudio here that we're superderiving, and we can then go ahead, if there were configuration variables, you would see the ability to like add these and then like edit them. And so that's probably something you guys have worked with. And this configuration right here is doing the exact same thing. Like if we were to put variables into this configuration in the superderive, that would be the exact same thing as going into here in superderive and putting in those variables. Are there any questions? Okay, cool. So if everything goes to plan, we should be able to call feature 2 and it will add our cylinder. So let's say we choose feature 2. Oh, we also do need to add the location. That's going to be a little bit. I'm going to redo this. Okay. So we'd want this to be mate connector. What's that? Body type. Yeah, so what I was just doing here is this parameter right here allows me to choose what the location is going to be, and we can point it at any mate connector or at the origin. Okay. So once we have that committed, we're going to add a really quick mate connector. Put that right there. And then we're going to go ahead and add our feature 2. Nope. Okay. So then we'll point it at this mate connector. And there you go. We have a feature that we made that contains this geometry right here from this PartStudio. And so that sort of completes the entire PartStudio within a feature method. So again, there's like, we have feature in a PartStudio, which I showed you with this first one. And then we have PartStudio within a feature, which is this one. It's a little bit weird, and we will be like making some more resources, like dividing between these two methods. But basically, like these two methods are things that you guys are going to be looking out for, and things that we're going to be incorporating with whatever CAD you guys are making in order to pull in the data from FeatureScript and any other like hydraulic calculations that we're making. Okay. Yeah, I guess like that's all I have for now. I know everybody has been very quiet, so please, if you have any questions, just like ask, and it's okay. There's like no stupid questions here. I know this is like new to all of you guys.
I have a question, Oliver.
Hmm?
So this feature 2 that you just brought in, PartStudio 3 in,
Yeah.
seems like similar functionality, just like a superderive.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair? Like, how is that different than when we would use a superderive? Or are you just kind of explaining how a superderive works?
Yeah, so you're right in that I could have technically just done this all by creating a feature in here. Like, I really didn't need to do this at all.
Mm-hmm.
I can just suppress this. I can show you what I actually just did. Location is here. PartStudio is this. Okay. I could have just done that,
Yeah.
but if we can tie our superderive into here, we can then add other logic above the superderive. We can add other calculations or variables. And I don't want to get into this now because it is like a little bit like more complex and it has to like deal with a lot of like what our more 3-level design strategy is going to be. But this is super, super helpful for being able to pass in our expert inputs. So if you remember from what Ethan was showing us the other day with our build function, what we can then do is we can create an input that has all of our expert inputs within this feature. So by doing this, all the user needs to do within the Part Studio is they just need to be like, oh, let me find this build function, and then let me put in whatever expert inputs that I want. And then just like that, that's going to do everything. That's going to run the calculations. That's going to do the superderive. And then it's going to put the Part Studio within whatever other Part Studio that that user was doing. So just like summarize that point, like we can technically do this with just superderive, but by doing it within a feature studio, it opens a lot of possibilities for extra stuff that we can add to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is the idea that that feature 2 is a similar functionality to the build feature?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Actually, build feature. And then our feature 1, like Oliver's feature, that's the same thing as the hydraulic
Right. That's
design.
HDF.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Anybody?
I was also just going to point out earlier that you mentioned something about when you set a variable in the feature script code, it has to be referencing something in the configuration variable. But I think that it wasn't working before because you had that variable feature overriding your length, and that's why it wasn't working.
Oh, I see.
So,
yeah, that is, yeah.
So just to everyone else, like you can still change the variables even after FeatureScript makes them. So it's important to like put your the hydraulic design feature all the way at the top and then don't touch it after that point because you can override it and it won't be. Yeah, so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was just referring to like this length here that I had. And yeah, you're right. That like screwed me up. I was really confused.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
So in the future, we should not be using configuration variables is kind of also an important part. We should only be bringing in variables that FeatureScript gives us or additional geometric ones that we happen to create, but they don't need to go into configurations.
Yeah, and also going along with that, I remember there have been concerns in the past about not knowing what FeatureScript is giving. And so the point of this is just to say, like, you can always figure out what FeatureScript is giving you if you go into Feature Studio and then you take a look at what this definition is being assigned. And so like, usually we're going to have, say, a bunch of different like statements like this where we're setting a definition variable. And with that, like you can have like a nice little list to take a look at all of the things that are being set.
I have another question. So in this example, you use the assign variable and like set variable. When I look at the Flocculator feature script, it doesn't have those. It just has like definitions. Is that because we're using like some different functionality, or what is the reason for that?
Let me take a look. Oh yeah, we are using a set variable right here.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Okay.
Basically, like what's going on here is instead of So we have all of these definitions right here. We have all of these variables. So like it would be ridiculous if we were to just go and like set variable, set variable, set variable for every single one of these. So we're just like really simply looping over every single one of those and then throwing them in. Like it doesn't hurt to have more than what you need, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And the reason we're using set variable instead of assign variable is what?
So in this context, this like set variable was meant to edit these configuration variables that were already in the Part Studio,
yes,
like up here. But
yeah.
If we look in, let's see, where's the Alphon BF? Alphon best friend. Yeah, if we look in this one, we aren't, wait, where's the hydraulic? This one? Okay. Let's see what we are doing here. I believe it's an assign variable.
Because that seems like it would make more sense, right? So that we can access it.
Yeah,
like it
exactly.
would pop up. Okay.
Yeah. And so like, for example, here, you might be like, oh, if you're working in, say, this Alphon Part Studio, you might be like, oh, I have no idea. I only see these 4 variables. Like, what's up? Like, what do I have access to? All you need to do is go into linked document. So you can see like this little feature here, open linked document. That opens, the stupid Zoom is popping up. It opens this right here. And then just, again, looking at this Alphon HDF, which is what we came from right here, we can then take a look at all of these variables that are being assigned. And all you really need is just these names. So like these, what do you call it? Like viscosity kinematic, even though you don't actually need it, we can, let me just add a dumb extrude down here or something. Yeah, even though we don't like need it, it still exists, viscosity kinematic right here. And that's because it came directly from here.
Right.
What's the easiest way to see what the values are of all of those variables?
That was exactly my question until I forgot it. Thank you, Monroe.
From within a Part Studio or from within FeatureScript, like here?
I think I'd like to know both ways.
Okay. Wait, actually, sorry. There actually is only one way from within a Part Studio. Never mind. Yeah. Okay. But within a Part Studio, there are multiple ways. So like this one of the ways that it's done is kind of annoying. Like you have to just like let the autocomplete show you what it is. And the other way, I guess, is if we have some sort of like print. Let's see. I don't believe I can edit this, and I don't really want to mess things up right now. But if we were to add like a simple print statement, you would see it printed here in the FeatureScript notices. And we do have a function that takes the entire definition map and just lists out every single variable that you have. We don't usually call it because then if you imagine like this FeatureScript notices gets super clogged up with all of these variables. But like that is always an option when we're working with these Part Studios to just like dump all of those variables into these FeatureScript notices. So again, to access this, you want to press this little curly brackets. If everything is good, there should be a check mark. And since there are errors, it's red and it has an exclamation point. And yeah, there are some errors that do need to be resolved here.
Would it be a ridiculous request to be like, there's a checkbox, and like if you check it, then that print statement comes up, and then we could look at it, and then if you don't need it, you can just uncheck it.
That's a great suggestion. Yeah, that's totally
Okay.
doable. Let's do that right now, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do a new Boolean parameter, which is the same thing as a checkbox, basically. So you can say like show variables, and then set it to show bars. And then if we want to say like if show definition.show, if we want to show the variables, then we just print definition. Okay, I think this should work. Let's see what happens. No.
And then you have to check it.
Oh yeah, that's right. Forgot that step. Okay. Close this out. Did this one, I believe? Show variables. Yep. Feature script notices. Wait a second. And there you have it.
Nice. That's good. That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. We'll definitely add that in. Yeah, let me actually write that down. Checkbox. Yeah, we'll definitely add that for the build feature and the hydraulic design feature.
Yeah.
That will really help debugging.
Okay. Cool. Any other questions or suggestions? Nope. Anybody?
Since we've got you here, can you look at SuperDerive and see? It sometimes is very difficult for us to end up like figure out why certain features that Ethan has made are failing. So is there a better way that we just don't know about? Like I didn't even know about feature script notices before, but is there like a way we can actually figure out which part of like our precondition or whatever is messing up the SuperDerive or a pipeline to better debug?
Yeah, this will be a lot easier if you have like an example. Like, is there something that you want to like specifically point at? If
usually
not,
this magically works sometimes and magically doesn't. But like if we could get more understanding on like why something is working, and like if we can let me make one fail and then we can look at it.
Okay, sure. Okay, I guess like I don't know if this is going to be a very satisfying answer, but there's like two ways. One is to just look at the feature script notices, and the other is to like dive into the code. And if you go into any instance of SuperDerive, are there any SuperDerive instances here? Okay, here. If you just go into, why can I not go to the linked document? There usually is an option here that says visit linked document, and it's not there right now. Whatever, I'm just going to do this the old-fashioned way. So I mean, like, it is possible to look at the source code. I know you probably wouldn't want to because you can see it's like pretty complicated, but like you do have access to like all of the higher level logic that's going on. And so you can see like there, if you just look inside of the basic SuperDerive feature, it's pretty, I'd say it's like not super easy to look through, but at least you do have access to like the main, like higher level, like what's going on. And so, yeah, I guess like there is this one error message that you can see here that happens. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like the best way to do this is to go into the feature script notices because like when you're just like within the Part Studio, those error messages are not that great. And usually if you go into the feature script notices, it'll like go into more detail as well as point to the lines of code at which it's failing.
Okay, I've got an example for you.
Okay, do you want to share your screen?
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Let me take a look at that.
I'm gonna overwrite your share.
Okay.
I think. Okay. So this we still have not fixed. Most of the other ones I feel like I can't replicate the error because then I'll probably figure out why it's wrong. Mm-hmm. But so what happens is we have one string which tells this pipe and as well as this pipe what size to be. Mm-hmm. And you'll find it. I hope you'll find it. Let's see. Right, so it's outlet config. It gives the manifold a size. So the exit launder is being passed that string, which tells it to be size 4. But if we can look at this pipe, very clearly not size 4, as well as the variable in here, which initially brings it out, is also size 4. It doesn't even have an option to be this small. So we had no idea what was wrong with it. And it actually, I think the only way we got it to work is we just made a new one, but we never actually figured out why this one was messing up. It gets spookier. Oh, does it? No, it doesn't. Okay, so we have another config that does the inlet, but you can see it's basically the same thing. I'm just passing it a different variable. Mm-hmm. So, and that one actually, let's see it live. This should work. This pipe should change size right now, which you can see it does. Mm-hmm. But similarly, unless this works, in which case I want you to know it didn't before.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
This pipe does not respond to this variable. Oh my God, it did. You can tell like I don't know, I don't understand like where the error is coming from. I feel like we're just like playing around in the dark. There you go. Okay. So for size 4, it doesn't understand what to do. It's like mapping size 4 to size 1/2 for some reason. You can't figure it out.
Okay, so 2 things. One, are you sure that it has not been changed since you like nothing in this Part Studio has been changed since you last?
Oh yeah, we can check. Let's find out. No, I think it's this one, right?
Yeah. I think
you can show changes.
Okay.
But that was just me a second ago. But the issue is since we're in such a big.
Say Nicole's name.
This is Nicole making stuff.
What? Oh.
I mean, this was the last modification.
When you moused over it, it said Nicole's name. Yeah, it was weird.
I am Nicole now. I've taken over. I am descendant.
No prequel memes in here. Okay. Yeah, I don't really have a quick answer to this right now. I would have to
like if we look in the feature script notices, like how can I start debugging? Like what should I start doing if I have this question instead of like me just asking you how should I approach this? I don't even know what all this is.
Yeah, like I mean if there's no error, then I'm not too sure like I'm not too sure what to tell you if there's no like explicit error that's going on, because if you look at the SuperDrive, it's like generating completely fine. I mean, okay, how about this? We can also make a really quick and simple breakpoint feature that's just going to take in a single variable and then print out what it is in the feature script notices. So hopefully that would be helpful for debugging cases like this.
Would we have to make that in the SuperDrive feature script, or can we make it in this and then it like calls this feature? I guess.
You don't even need to call that feature. It's just going to be like pulling in the existing variables that are in the Part Studio. It doesn't need to be tied to any existing feature.
So so are you saying like it'll show me this outlet size is 4? Like, is that similar to what you're saying? But this like, obviously you're looking at the other variables.
Yeah, it would show it
Okay.
in the feature script notices. So it's sort of like you would put this after the exit launder. So you'd see like, oh, what's wrong with my ND? Like, I want to print that out after the exit launder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm also pretty confused because this part got made correctly, but the pipe didn't. So.
I'm also not convinced that it's not completely on the template side. Like, it may be wrong. It may have to do with SuperDrive, but it may also just be that we didn't put a variable somewhere.
Yeah, that's completely valid. And yeah, unfortunately, like the only way for us to know is if we like print out what the value is like actually being passed in there.
Like
enums do work a little bit strangely in Onshape, I will tell you that. Like that, because we have to lock in the value of that. That's definitely like a weird edge case that's kind of difficult to account for.
Maybe this one. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this has any any merit or possibility, but would it be possible to create like a small set of debugging features that would be available on the palette at the top of Onshape that you could just pop in to help figure things out like this?
Yeah, totally. We like currently I would just be making like a simple like print feature. Is there anything else that you think would be useful? I think we can like start with just like a print feature to just like really simply like say, oh, what's this variable equal to? And then if we need like other use cases, then we can like add those really easily.
That would be great.
Is there any way that a variable like that could, in the little dialog box where you enter which variable you want to watch, that it would actually display the value in that same box?
Yeah, that's doable. Yeah, that's definitely doable. It's like a little bit of a weird thing, but yeah, we can edit the name of the feature that's within that left-hand side. Yeah.
In the Onshape, oh, sorry. In the Onshape document, was it using SuperDrive to like create a pipe?
Are you referring to the thing that Tigran showed?
Yeah.
In the side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, but I think I figured it out.
Okay.
I was calling the wrong version.
Yep, that happens. Okay.
I have a more general question. So I kind of asked this before about like the difference between the build feature and the SuperDrive. When are we using SuperDrive and when are we using build feature, I guess is my question. Because it seems like for the pipe library, we don't need to use the build feature. So like we can use SuperDrive on that, and then so where's the line?
Yeah, I guess like the difference between the SuperDrive, I'd say like the build feature, what we're like envisioning it to be is to be something like, oh, I have an empty Part Studio, I want to throw a flocculator into it. That's like the use case that we have. I feel like SuperDrive is meant to be more granular in that you have to think about things like, oh, I want to change the size of this pipe at the same time that I bring it into this Part Studio. And I think that like the build features are likely going to be the only thing that the end user is going to be dealing with. but SuperDerive is like what we are going to be using, both like in Part Studios and within FeatureScript, in order to sort of like pull in geometry from other Part Studios.
Okay, so it would be good to get basically a list of everything that we want to be build featureable, and then everything else is SuperDerive.
Yeah, exactly. And okay. I think we like foresee just like every unit process to just have its own build feature.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, this was really good. Like, honestly, it never occurred to me that like just having a very simple feature to like print things or to like debug would be so helpful for you guys. So like this is useful for both ends as well, this meeting.
Is there a way we can filter out the FeatureScript notices? Because I think it gives it for all of the Agua Clara plant. So like we'll see it for like the LFOM when we're working in the filter or something like that. Is there a way we can get a better? Sorry,
I don't think so.
Okay.
The best thing that I can tell you is to close the drop-down menus. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This was super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys for coming out to this. Yeah.
Made the trek all the way to the internet just for
you. Yeah. I say that kind of like instinctually now, but it's been 3 months or 4 months since we've had in-person meetings, so
yeah,
old habits die hard.
Oliver, I was really impressed. You did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, really happy to help. Yeah. All right, cool. I will make this recording stop.